Hello, guys. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this special live episode. Today is Saturday. This is actually not our usual episode when it comes to our What's Up Doc live. But this Saturday, I planned into actually being with you because I want to share with you my recent journey when it comes to my laboratory. So, as you all know, 2 months ago, I engaged in the longest fasting so far. So I did my 14 days of fasting. And also, that one is somewhat remarkable because one of my goals why I did that 2 weeks, 14 days of fasting is actually for me to have a proper restart or a new beginning. Because even if I've been practicing low carb and fasting for so long, there are still times that I still give in to carbs or sometimes I overeat. So even if I'm staying low carb, I actually want to develop some degree of control and really practice moderation. It's one of my most important goals. In addition to my own self experimentation, wherein I want to know what can I do if I really will die or if I will really do well if ever I do that 7 days of dry fasting. So 7 days dry fasting plus 7 days of water fasting. So that's why I completed the full 2 weeks of fasting. And this, after 2 months of that, I checked my blood glucose. If you are part of our low carb feasting and fasting community, you can see there my laboratory result immediately after. So I think I was still on my 11th or 12th day fast. My LDL then was very, very high. And somewhat what was surprising after my 8th day of my dry fasting before I broke it with water fasting, it was actually somewhat a little elevated than usual. I think it was my highest triglycerides. And imagine I wasn't able to eat anything. I didn't drink anything by then. It was more than 120 hours of full dry fasting. Yet for the first time, my triglycerides is elevated. It only goes to show that my body is actively fueling from fats, from ketones. And my glucose level then is 95. So it was a fasting of almost 8 days, 7 days and a half to be exact, of fasting, and my glucose is 95. So it's fairly normal. Only goes to show that our body can really do its own compensatory mechanism when it comes to gluconeogenesis. So I try to maintain that. My usual HbA1c is actually around 5.3, 5.4, 5.6. So if you do that in equivalent, so we have this graph. Okay, so usually I have my HbA1c around here, around 5.5 or 5.3. So it's less than 100. So it's actually good because HbA1c or glycated hemoglobin or glycohemoglobin, it will give you the idea your average blood glucose control for the last 3 months. Okay, and in this time I want to lower it even more. So I want to make sure that my HbA1c is less than 100, so that it means that even if after eating there's no spike of my blood sugar. So I checked it the other week before month end. I think it was the date here. I know date here. I think I got this on Monday. What's Monday? Monday is May 31. So that was also the last day that I did my water dry fasting 2 months ago. That was March 31. I think it was May 1, April 1 when I broke it. So I want you to see my lab results. Okay, so this is my lab result. Hello, everyone. For those who are here, thank you so much. We will tackle this one by one. And don't worry, we will make you understand why you actually don't need to worry. Okay? So this one you can see there. First was my glycohemoglobin. So what is glycohemoglobin? Okay, so glycohemoglobin, also known as HbA1c or hemoglobin A1c. So there's actually other letters, but hemoglobin A1c is noted to actually give you the average of your glucose control of your blood sugar for the last 3 months. It will measure the amount of blood glucose that is attached to your red blood cells. And normally, your red blood cells are actually dying and renewing every 3 months. Okay, so that's why part of them, whenever you take in food, because your red blood cells, also known as erythrocytes, is actually the important marker wherein whenever you take in glucose, they also, part of that glucose get stuck with them or get attached to them. And it's normal, it's natural. It's just that the more glucose you eat, the more elevated your blood sugar is. There is this also higher tendency for those elevated glucose to be attached to your red blood cells or your hemoglobin. Okay, they are attached to the hemoglobin part of your red blood cells. So it is usually normal. And as per experience, especially in communities with dry fasting, if you have been following me since then, you will see there that I had somewhat partly evidence that my red blood cells actually renewed after 7 days of dry fasting. My centrifuge blood that was withdrawn from me showed around 1/3 of new or young blood cells. So I want to check if my hemoglobin A1C is still okay. So in here we can see it's 5.1. So if 5.1, from this graph, you can see that 5.1 is maybe around 92. So 92, okay? So somewhat that is what I am really aiming for, to have a HbA1c or glycohemoglobin. So it's there's thunder here. It's not so, the weather is not so good here. So that's my HbA1c. I only took this laboratory results. This is glycohemoglobin and lipid panel. So everything below here, the triglycerides, cholesterol, HDL, LDL are all part of our lipid panel. Okay, so lipid panel is actually composed of these. Others will have VLDL in addition to that. Okay, but you can actually easily compute that if you want to. So why did I took this? Because for the longest time that I've had my blood results, everything else is normal. SGPT, SGOT, creatinine, all of my electrolytes are always normal. And then my CBC, my urinalysis are always normal. So in medicine, there is no point of getting these lab results, lab requests, without any reason. Okay, so there's no reason for me to take those. I don't have any clinical symptoms. I do not have any problems. So basically, even this, I do not have any indication. But this is for my own personal documentation. That's why I got this. I got this. Aside from saving money, of course, this is just what I am very interested to know. Okay, my glycohemoglobin. So even if this one is not representative of the last 2 months after my fasting, it goes to show that even before I did my 14 days fasting, I am already somewhat on a normal lower range of normal glucose. And this time, we will tackle triglycerides. Okay, medyo galit ang mundo ngayon. So, first, what do you want for me to discuss? The triglycerides or cholesterol? Okay, so our topic is about total cholesterol and total HDL. And I think that is one of the most common findings among those of you who are practicing low carb and fasting. And when you go and consult with your doctors, mostly cardiologists, internal medicine, your family doctors, and general physicians, they will automatically give you statins. So it can be simvastatin, atorvastatin, rosuvastatin. So all of those statins, they all aim to lower your blood cholesterol. But what is really important is for you to really check and you to understand what is composed of your cholesterol in the blood, that lipid panel. So in here, the third one here, cholesterol, that will actually indicate your total cholesterol. And that would already include your triglycerides, LDL, and HDL. Okay, so my total cholesterol is high. So the normal is only up to 5.2, but mine is 7.7. So if you have an equivalent of that, Let's check 7.7 millimoles in cholesterol. Let's see. We will have 300 milligrams per DL, and I think the normal range is just around 250, right? Or sometimes they want it lower to 220, but mine is already at 300. So I know a lot of you have been following Dr. Berg, Dr. Neyman. We have a lot of low carb doctors, Dr. Fong, and many more. You might know that having a high total cholesterol is actually not that bad and nothing to be scared of if okay, there's a big if to this. If you know that the component that makes it high is not triglycerides. Okay? So HDL is considered as a protective kind of cholesterol. The higher your HDL, the lower is your risk for cardiovascular outcomes. Meaning, the higher your HDL, it is shown, studies show that it is actually protective of heart disease. So your risk of having heart attack, your risk of having stroke is actually not that high. Okay? Your HDL is protecting you. Triglycerides is considered to be like the bad cholesterol. Okay, so there are studies. So we will look at the studies showing that triglycerides is actually a useful tool for us to know that if we have that degree of risk in when it comes to our risk of heart disease. Okay, but LDL is the one that is always misunderstood. Okay, I myself, I admit, was trained under the idea that LDL is a bad cholesterol. Only the HDL is the good cholesterol. HDL is good, LDL and triglycerides are bad. But now we know more. And what we see here is that LDL is actually not bad. But you can think of LDL as a child, okay? So if a child is surrounded by good children as well, kind, respectful, well-mannered children, that child will become good as well. However, if that child is always surrounded by bullies, by those who do not have good manners, and those who are not so good when it comes to that. So that child is actually highly influenceable, okay? He is vulnerable to that influence. So an LDL is like that. If you pair LDL with a bad company, that LDL will act bad. But if that LDL is surrounded by good company, kind and very healthy company, that LDL is actually going to be a good LDL. So how is that? How would that work? So it is because LDL is simply low density lipoprotein. So L for low density and density, low density, and last L would be lipoprotein. By lipoprotein, you mean it is made up of proteins and lipids. So it is actually a protein carrying a lipid. So it's low density, meaning it has a higher, bigger bulk of cholesterol that it carries. Okay? LDL only becomes bad if you are not using that cholesterol. But for those who are into low carb nutrition, who are eating low carb, others who are eating keto, okay, and most especially those people who are already fasting, okay, that LDL is actually not bad because it simply goes to show that that LDL is being mobilized. It is a byproduct of our liver that our liver makes in order to supply the energy that our body needs. As compared for a person that does have a normal LDL, actually, if that person is, say for example, have 200 LDL, however, if he is solely fueling from glucose, then he might have higher risk of heart attack. It's because those LDL get stagnated. They don't move. They are just there in your blood. The risky LDL, the LDL that we don't want, are the LDL that we don't use. But if you are using that LDL on a regular basis, so it's being used up and changed and replenished, So there's no cause to worry because you are using that LDL for your fuel to be converted into ketones in our body whenever we are already what we call as fat adapted, okay? And as a start, we go into ketosis first, okay? So it is important for us to realize that LDL, whenever it is high among patients, among people who are doing low carb, keto, and fasting, it only goes to show that your body is actually now utilizing fats for energy. So, of course, you don't take my word for it. So, that's why we will look into the specifics, which is related to journal articles, scientific articles. And don't worry, I will translate it all for you. Let's see, let's look up, and it is a direct screen share from Google Scholar and the other articles that we have here. So first, what do we have? So we have this abstract, and in here, low LDL. Why am I not worried when it comes to my LDL? This is one of the reasons. Low LDL cholesterol and increased risk of Parkinson's disease. A prospective study from Honolulu, Asia Aging Study. So this is somewhat quite technical, and but the conclusion here is that the prospective study supports the hypothesis that low LDL is associated with increased risk of Parkinson's disease, okay? Although they have to yet confirm the underlying mechanism, okay? But it is important for us to realize that LDL is actually not bad for us, okay? This is only saying that LDL is actually promoting our body in formation. Oh no, I think this is a different kind of. I'll share the different kind of journal. So let's do that again. So this is the first one. LDL cholesterol and increased risk of Parkinson's disease. So that's why I am not worried whenever I see my LDL high, because I know it is protecting my brain from Parkinson's disease. So Parkinson's disease is, we all know, as leading to dementia, or it's a cognitive decline, okay? So the most important, one of the most important manifestation would be forgetfulness, and sometimes they have uncontrolled tremors, and they have spasm, so they cannot move so much, okay, because all of their muscles somewhat are paralyzed, or not really paralyzed, spastic. So that it's always on spastic mode, okay? So one of the reason why I'm not afraid that my LDL cholesterol is high, it's because I know it's protective of my brain. And why is it protective of my brain? And it is because LDL, or cholesterol in general, actually also provides the basic ingredients for our body to make the necessary steroids on a good amount that we need, the necessary hormones that we need, and even our bile acids, okay? So LDL is not bad, okay? Again, LDL only becomes bad if it's paired with higher triglycerides, higher hemoglobin A1C, okay? And as you can see from my result a while ago, my triglycerides is actually very, very low, and it is even having a lower HbA1c. So another, let's go to another journal, okay? Because I told you, you don't take my word for it, but we will see what unbiased science actually says about. Okay, so this study is a prospective study of dietary glycemic load, carbohydrate intake, and risk of coronary heart disease. Okay, so the risk for coronary heart disease is mistakenly pointed out to LDL. But what are the current data now? Okay, this study shows that it's actually not the cholesterol that we should really look into, but the dietary glycemic load, okay? And our glycemic load can be indirectly measured through our blood sugar control, okay? So it is important for us to really make sure that our glucose is in control. You can forget about getting into ketosis. As long as your glycemic load is low, you can ensure that your your inflammation in the body and all of your risk for heart attack can also be lowered. Okay. Facebook makes it difficult to access the link. Don't worry, I will tell you later how you can access the full link. Okay, you can just copy the ones that you have there in the description, and then you can go to googlescholar.com. Okay, you have to search it yourself because Facebook will not allow that. So in here, what we see here is that it's not actually the cholesterol alone, okay, but it is the intake of increased carbohydrate, increased glycemic load. That's why we are focusing our effort not actually in lowering fats, but in lowering our carbohydrate intake. Because with lowered carbohydrate intake, we also lower our blood glucose level. And when we lower that, we also lower our risk for coronary heart disease. Okay, so let's move on to another study, which is here. Okay, so cognitive dysfunction associated with metabolic syndrome. Okay, so cognitive dysfunction, there is again a problem with your brain. So you cannot think well. I've been trying to look up for the other journal, but I cannot seem to find it. It is actually an association between higher LDL and higher intelligence, and lower LDL with poorer mental function. People tend to be more forgetful. People tend to be somewhat not functioning well, especially when given a task, arithmetic task. So in here, we see cognitive function with metabolic syndrome. So don't ever mistaken metabolic syndrome with high LDL. High LDL can only occur with metabolic syndrome if you also have insulin resistance. Okay, so insulin resistance, you can have high blood sugar there, and but the most sensitive measurement, of course, is the serum insulin level. But we don't have that here. But you can have an gauge of it by knowing your daily glucose control. Okay, and of course your degree of inflammation. Speaking about inflammation, by the way, you can indirectly get your inflammation. I will put it here. If you want to measure your degree of inflammation, because LDL is only worrisome, okay, is only worrisome if it is together with high TG, triglycerides, high and high glucose, and high glucose plus high degree of inflammation. High degree of inflammation, wherein our inflammation, we have markers that you can actually check from your blood chemistry if you want it. So we have ESR and CRP. So these lab tests are actually not really so these lab tests are not routine. You have to request that if you want to take that. So ESR is erythrocyte sedimentation rate, and CRP is C-reactive protein. If you want to check that, you can have that checked. Okay. So with high LDL and high ESR and CRP, so you should really worry, because that means that your body is undergoing inflammation, and that LDL may contribute to that inflammation. But LDL alone with lower inflammation, low triglycerides, and low glucose and or a normal glucose control, it is nothing there is nothing to worry about. Okay, so let's go to another study wherein we discuss in here Parkinson's disease. We already have this, so we have it here. Okay, higher plasma LDL cholesterol is associated with preserved executive and fine motor functions in Parkinson's disease. Again, we can see here how a good number of LDL actually is protective for us as well. Okay, there's really no study saying that isolated high LDL is a risk factor. If if so you can double check. You have to check if they also take into account the degree of inflammation and also the degree of glucose control in that person. Okay, but generally a high plasma LDL together with the friends, no, with the good kinds of kids, which are lower HbA1c, lower triglycerides, you have nothing to worry about. So next study we have here, let's see. So we are already done with higher plasma cholesterol and in here. How about statins? We will discuss that in a short while. In here, let's visit joint effects here. So this is the joint effects of serum triglycerides and LDL cholesterol and HDL cholesterol concentrations on coronary heart disease risk in the Helsinki Heart Study. Okay, so they look into triglycerides, LDL, and HDL. Okay, and they see that it's actually not the LDL that you should really look into, but it is the serum triglyceride concentration, which has really the prognostic value. Okay, it's the triglycerides that have the higher impact on your heart risk, on your risk for developing heart attack, in your risk for developing atherosclerosis, in your risk for developing stroke. Okay, but it together with a combination of HDL, okay, and LDL. So again, it's not alone that you should be worried about LDL. But if ever you are already doing low carb and already into fasting, but you still see your LDL is high together with your triglycerides, then it is the right time to really look closely with what you are eating, because you might actually be eating high fat and you might be eating the wrong kinds of fat. Okay, so the wrong kinds of fat would be the canola oil, the vegetable oil, the trans fats. You have seed oils, corn oil, rice bran oil, grapeseed oil, margarine, shortening, all of those processed oils, hydrogenated oils. You should really avoid that. The safest one to use would be coconut oil. Okay, so if you can use coconut oil for cooking, that's the safest for your body and also for the environment. Palm oil may be a little safe for your body, but it's not good for the environment. So let's avoid using palm oil. Okay, you can use olive oil and avocado oil for your salads, maybe taken as fresh as possible. And if you are not vegan or vegetarian, you can also use lard, tallow, pork fats. You can use that as a substitute for your cooking oil. So moving on, let's have another show. So we will discuss now about statins. Okay, so let's see here, what do we have when it comes to statins. Let's check for the available journal that we can lift. So statins, what are statins in general? Did I have here? Yes. First, we have to understand what are statins. Okay, so statins is an inhibitor of HMG-CoA reductase. Okay, so the red one here, the red one on this graph. Okay, so it is an inhibitor of that. So it inhibits formation actually of cholesterol. So, but there are a lot of studies now that we are seeing wherein people who are into statins don't feel good. Although there are conflicting data, we have to be fair. It's not all studies that are saying that statins are bad. Okay, there are studies that are saying that statins are bad for the brain, but there are also studies saying that for those with Alzheimer's disease, it somewhat helps them. Okay, so there's conflicting studies about that. But what can explain here is that statins, without cholesterol actually in the body, you also lower your steroids, your bile acids, and your vitamin D. Because vitamin D is now considered as the most important vitamins that you should be taking. But actually, vitamin D you can just take from cholesterol. Okay, vitamin D is activated through sun exposure. Okay, but even if you are being exposed to the sun all year round, but you do not have the precursor for it to be activated, which is D2. Activated vitamin D is already D3. Before D3, it became D1, D2, and before that, it was this, the hydroxy. It is this, the 3-hydroxy methyl gluteryl CoA. Okay, so it came from there. And if you are not taking much cholesterol, because again you are avoiding that because we have been warned that that is dangerous, we actually tend to have lower vitamin D. And vitamin D is very important in all of our bodily functions, even with our brain. So that's why with lowered cholesterol, and since our brain is somewhat made of cholesterol, that's why it's even good to eat the brain in Tuslobua in Cebu. Hello for everyone there who are in Cebu. So that's pig brain, okay? And we eat that because it's good for us, okay? Of course, as long as you don't eat it together with your puso or your rice, because otherwise it might not do you that good, especially if you pair it up with the soft drinks afterwards. So what is important for us to realize here is that the many different side effects that people are experiencing when it comes to their intake of statins is actually because of the lowered steroids, lowered hormones that are being created from cholesterol, lowered vitamin D. Okay? And you may choose to take vitamin D in supplement form, but of course, nothing can beat the natural source. Okay? And there is actually a study, and in here, no, another one. Yes, so there is a study that showed the myotoxicity that can happen when you have been taking statins for so long. So this study is this one. Okay. So myotoxicity of statins, the mechanism of action. Okay. So in here you can see that you may read it as very technical. We can move on to here. So it's mostly related to its action on the myocytes. Myocytes are the muscle cells, okay? So it can have an effect that can lead to apoptosis, proteolysis, muscle remodeling, okay? And it can lead into this, responsible for fatigue, cramps, myalgia or muscle pain, and elevation of serum CK. Okay, so CK is another component that is usually measured when there is too much of inflammation or changes in the body. And in here, lessons prone to reduce high supplementation of vitamin D in patients because vitamin D is also being lowered. So that is the reason why people who are taking statins for so long, even if some might not have a direct impact in their brain when it comes to functioning, when it comes to intelligence, but all of them consistently showed a lower quality of life impact. So, what does that mean? None of them are already happy. They find it hard to be happy. And I think that is not a good thing, especially that we are actually targeting the wrong things. If you have been given LDL, statins to lower your LDL despite high HDL and low triglycerides, you actually need to question that. Okay, so I think one of our topics that we said here is that we will also discuss about LMHR. Who among you here are familiar with LMHR? So LMHR is actually LMHR is lean mass hyperresponders. Hyperresponders. Okay. So it is usually seen among people who are doing low carb and who are doing fasting. So technically, it will go as a high LDL, okay, a high HDL, and a triglycerides that is below 70 millimoles. Okay, so my triglycerides, if we look back to my result, okay, we can see, let's see if I can be categorized as LMHR. So triglycerides 0.8 in, if we convert that, 0.58 millimoles to milligrams per DL would be, where is it? It's not here. Triglycerides. I think it was around 658. I wasn't able to take a photo of the other sides. Triglycerides. So yes, so that equivalent is just around 60? No, 58. 58. Is that right? Yes. 0.58 triglycerides in millimoles to DL. Yeah. Okay, I wasn't able to check. Okay, so lean mass hyperresponders. I'll show you what are lean mass hyperresponders. LMHR. You can check it if you want to. Okay, so that we know that it is actually not something to worry about, and it is actually something that really happens. Okay, so lean mass hyperresponders, if I am to is someone who also experiences a dramatic rise in LDL cholesterol, like more than 50%. And this is a new term that is actually been floating around. So a lean mass hyperresponders will have a higher LDL and a normal. It is important that you should know that should be paired with a normal triglycerides level, or below or lower than 70 triglycerides level. Okay, so it is important for us to really see that it is not a cause of worry, because it is something that occurs very frequently among people who are doing low carb and fasting. But of course, this is just me. Okay, I am sharing this to you, but as a disclaimer, I am not applying this to my patient. For my patient, of course, there is still a way for you to, if the patient wants to really lower their LDL to the normal level, then it can be done. Okay, so how can we lower our LDL to normal level? So you can just continue eating low carb by not going out of low carb. You can continue eating low carb. You can increase your protein intake, okay, up to 30 to 35%, or even up to 50% of your diet. And you can just consume the essential fats, or the most important fats, which would be omega-3 coming from fish oil. Omega-6, you only need to limit that. Okay, omega-6 is essential, but more than the essential ones, like too much canola oil, too much soybean oil, that can lead to inflammation. So it's very tricky. So it's important that you just take just enough of that omega-6 for you to get that essential fats. You can also take VCO, virgin coconut oil, or extra virgin coconut oil if you want that, for you to ensure that you are taking the good fats. Okay, olive oil is omega-9. It's not essential, but it helps in increasing your HDL level. Okay, so, and if you want to really lower that, you may want to look into your calorie count. Okay, so we know that with low carb and fasting, we are not into counting our calorie much, but as just to show you how it is also good for us to look into our calorie intake, because actually we could be eating more than we need. Okay, because one tablespoon of oil or fat can already give you around 120 grams, 120 kilocalories. So that is how energy dense it is. So two ways: either you lower your overall calorie intake, especially coming from fats that are made up of cholesterol that you already have in your body, or you can increase your exercise. Okay, but if you don't want that, so you can just be okay with knowing that a high LDL, as long as it's with lower normal sugar level and normal triglycerides level, normal inflammatory levels, no inflammation like ESR and CRP, then you can just sleep well at night. But if you want to be on the safest side, that is safe among standard data, that is safe even among low carbers, because you want to be on the safest side, that is still lowering your cholesterol on a normal range that is acceptable by the current standard of what is normal, just like what you can see here. So the normal LDL maximum should just be 3.5. Is that 3.5 or 3.3? So 3.9 rather. So if you want to stick to that 3.9 only, so you can consider cutting in your food intake in general if you can, or increasing your physical activity so that you can consume that, because that is actually extra energy that you are not using. And yes, this is extra energy that I may not be using, or I would like to believe that I've been using it, but just on the right, on my brain and on some of my muscles, since I've been fat adapted for quite a long time. But of course, maybe I can lower it, maybe not, but that is just me. And don't worry, I'm not applying it to my patient. Okay, so I will entertain some of the questions here. So let's see. What's this? Me, I have researched on LMHR so that my wife will let me continue keto despite my lipid panel results. Haha, thanks, Dr. Grace. So this is actually my good friend, Dr. Nico de la Cruz. So I'm not the only one here. I'm not the only doctor here. If you can share to our group, Doc Nico, your research on LMHR, so that yes, yeah, I'm glad that your wife already allowed you to go into keto and low carb, because actually there's nothing to fear here if only you are really not biased, you are really not afraid. Okay, I want to show you the effect of too much simvastatin, too much statins in the system when taken in excess. Okay, so where is that? Let's see. Statins MOA. So statins in here. This one. Can you see this? Let's see. So this one is the statins. Let's check if we can get a bigger picture of that. Oh. In here. So this one, how can we pick? Here. Okay. I'll make that bigger for you guys so that you can see and appreciate what we have. So statins toxicity research here. So you can see there that statins inhibit here on the upper part. Okay, so there is HMG CoA reductase. Inhibited by statins, but sometimes so it will go in this one. So there will be the cholesterol will be lower. There will be lowered lipoproteins, just like LDL. But remember, we are lowering LDL, but we are also lowering bile acids, steroid hormones, vitamin D status. Okay, the regulation of these enzymes, all of these protein structures and function are also affected, just because you want to lower that one item only. Okay, and it can have problems in your mitochondria and the other parts of your cells. Okay, it can have influence on your genetic expression. So when there is statin toxicity, okay, so it can lead to this, the one in the red line. So there is increased drug metabolism and decreased membrane stability and enzyme leakage. Okay, so what is enzyme leakage? So enzyme leakage, it's just a medical term for you, that you will now have higher ALT, AST, higher SGPT, SGOT. So these enzymes are actually liver enzymes. Okay, so when do we see them increase? SGPT, SGOT, ALT, AST, those are liver enzymes. When do they see them increase? When you have fatty liver or when you have liver damage. And this is one of the effects of statins. Okay, impaired neuronal members, myelin sheath, and nerve synapses, decrease serotonin activity. So it's in the brain. First, the neuronal members and all that. So it has something to do with brain functioning and with our nerves, our sensations, our neural connections, how our brain connects with the other, how one nerve cell or brain cell connects with the other cell, and how we function in general. And serotonin, there's decreased serotonin activity. And when there is decreased serotonin activity, serotonin is one of our happy hormones. So if there is decreased happy hormones, what do we get? Not so happy. Okay, so we tend to have a lower degree of optimism, of positive vibes when there is statin toxicity. Okay, so we are not saying that when you take statins you will have this. Okay, no, but if there is toxicity already, so it is usually dose dependent, depending on how much is your dose, and also frequency, and also temporal aspect, which is how long have you been taking this. Okay, but if your doctor just gave you just a month for you to lower it, so we don't know, maybe this will not happen. But if you've been taking statins for 5 years, 10 years, and your dose keep on increasing and increasing, and sometimes you have multiple drugs just to lower your cholesterol, then maybe you can check if you experience any of these. So the next one, the one in the middle, we have fiber damage and atrophy. So fiber damage, so damage in our muscles. Atrophy is shrinkage. It's like dying. It's like getting old. So atrophy, it dies down. Okay. Impaired repair and generation. Yeah. So even if you're exercising, you can actually even do harm in your muscles, because if there's already statin toxicity. And decreased glucose uptake, so meaning if there's decreased glucose uptake, so your cells actually will not be accepting much of that glucose, so that is actually contributory to insulin resistance. And here on the pancreas, decreased calcium channel signaling, decreased glucose homeostasis, and decreased insulin secretion. So overall, it's decreased. So with decreased insulin secretion, so what will allow your body to accept all of those sugar, especially if you're taking all of those foods with a high carb meal? So you are actually risking yourself as well with hyperglycemia. That's why it's not uncommon. Okay, it's not uncommon. Another way of saying it is common for us to see a person who is diabetic and then having problem with cholesterol, or first having problem with cholesterol and then later on with diabetes. Okay, next one would be protein reabsorption. So you can actually, on your kidneys, you are throwing all of that proteins that you need, so that could lead to hypoalbuminemia rather, because of albuminuria, meaning the albumin is in your urine, and hypoalbuminemia is your albumin is already low within your blood. And it's important. Low albumin can have manifestations of swelling, edema, so water retention in your body. That could be because of low albumin level in your body. And lastly, glucose uptake decreased in your fats, impaired maturation, increased hormone secretion. So overall, this is related to decreased in your hormone response to, especially with glucose, and it is somewhat synonymous to higher risk of developing insulin resistance and even worsening your already hyperglycemia. Okay, so that is why I'm not actually afraid why I have high LDL, especially that my cholesterol, my HDL is actually high, and my triglycerides is low. So because people are just always looking at LDL and cholesterol ratio, okay? But it's not supposed to be that way, because we are not looking into LDL. What are the better options would be triglycerides to HDL ratio, so that you know how good you are. Okay, so triglycerides to, I'll put that here so that you will remember, triglycerides to HDL ratio. Okay, so triglycerides to HDL ratio, so you just divide. So supposedly a lower risk of heart attack and diseases, cardiovascular diseases, okay, is related if your triglycerides to HDL ratio is more than 1, meaning if your triglycerides is higher than your LDL. Okay, but for me, I think Doc Suzette Encarnado of My Low Carb Pinoy MD calculated it for me. So it was just 0.3. Okay, so it's actually very, very low. So even if, say for example, your LDL is normal, but your triglycerides is actually very high, so that person is actually of higher risk of developing heart disease, stroke, heart attack, than someone with higher LDL but lower triglycerides HDL ratio. Another would be about remnant cholesterol. Okay, so remnant cholesterol is the cholesterol that you don't use. Okay, so it will be equivalent to the ones that's not measured there, which is usually VLDL. Okay, but we have to take that in milligrams per DL. But I wasn't able to get that, and I feel tired computing. But maybe I can post it later. Remnant cholesterol. You can look it up. Remnant cholesterol. Okay, that's a good way also. You compute for your remnant cholesterol because it is more objective. It is not just showing how much total cholesterol that you have, but actually it's the cholesterol that is stagnating or is not being used. Okay, so yes, that's the reason why LDL is actually only worrisome if it is together with high triglycerides and high glucose plus high degree of inflammation, ESR and CRP. And if we can add to that, included also would be what else? What else have you learned? And high LDL. We have to make that into high LDL so that you can see. So yes, that's the reason why I hope you learned something today, guys, with our instant live episode for today. And if you are watching, I am inviting you all for our Diabetes Masterclass, which will start tomorrow. If you are interested, we will wait for you for our pre-registration period. And of course, we will see you. This is going to be a 21 long day masterclass. If you like this video and you think you can learn, and don't worry, most of you can appreciate it hopefully better since it will be in Filipino, and we will just have English subtitles for those who are English speakers, okay? But it will be an interactive group. It will be going to a support group. After the 21 days, the group will still be there. We can still accept new enrollees, but the pre-registration period will just end today. So thank you so much. We are looking at here. Creatinine, if creatinine is elevated, then that can be a problem of your kidneys. So better make sure that you have consulted first before doing anything drastic. And MCT oil, yes, it is a good source of fats. MCT oil is usually extracted from coconut oil, so but without the smell of coconut. So a lot of people prefer that. So MCT oil is readily converted into ketones. So you can just have that as supplement, or actually if you still have fats to lose, better to use your own fats as energy. But if you are already, like, say for example, very lean and with less than 15% of body fat, then you can use ketones to help you with your energy, especially if you want to increase more of your performance. Sabi ni Gilbert, for people taking medications, you must consult first your doctor and they will be the one to adjust your medications. Better kung LC doctor, because yes, they will understand your journey very well. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody. I'll try to see if I can get back to you with your questions. But this one is also live in our YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel, Dr. Josephine Grace Rojo, for more videos. And if you have any health worries, most of that has been discussed already, so you can just check it there. So thank you so much. Onyx girl, come here, come here, come here, come here. Up, 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 and say goodbye. Onyx girl, bye everybody. Thank you. Wait, wait, wait. And let's end the broadcast.